What's going on, guys? My name is Valerio and welcome to another tutorial here on our channel, The Guide. Today's tutorial is one that's going to cover both the defensive and offensive side of things. I'm talking about running duels. The reason for that is that running duels can be seen all over the pitch, and there's going to be a variety of situations in which they're going to become an important thing for you to deal with, whether defensively you're trying to get to a loose ball first or shrugging off an opponent's striker, or you're the one on the offensive end with a striker in the open field and you're trying to break away from the opponent's defender. Regardless of the situation, there are certain tips and tricks to keep in mind that will give you the edge to come out victorious in these situations. First though, if you haven't checked out our Instagram yet, we're really close to the 3,000 follower mark and we'd really appreciate if you guys checked out our content there. We have many things coming, all the way from promo and player reviews to player instructions to try in new formations that you may have not tried yet. As usual, link to everything can be found in the description box down below. And now, without further ado, let's get into how to deal with running duels. One of the defensive situations in which many beginners get outplayed is fast-paced counterattacks in the open field. Your opponent will find opportunities to use his strong or fast strikers to propel himself into open space, so knowing how to deal with it is super important, especially at this stage in the game where tons of players have really strong options up top. Now, a mistake people make when trying to defend successfully in a running duel is that they'll completely mistime their entry point, so to speak, or the moment where one decides to barge into the attacker. Here, for example, as my opponent runs in with Semedo down the wing, I'm using my 87 rated Maldini to try and win the ball back. Statistically, I have the upper hand. Pace between the two players is matched when including chem styles. I don't have to worry about being the one dribbling. My player has incredible defensive stats and is also much more physical. All of this though goes out the window because, as you can see, I decide to put pressure on him far too early. By the time I make contact with him, I am slightly behind him, which results in him easily slipping away as I get stuck behind his body. You have to keep that in mind because barging into your opponent in a running duel at the wrong angle, aka far too early, will be much more of a factor than how good your defensive player is. A correct interpretation of a good entry point can be seen in this example where I'm about to enter a duel against Ronaldo, one of the best, if not the best, striker in the game. Now, our initial pressure was a bit too rushed and we were actually slightly behind him. So instead of committing to this path and hoping for the best by pressuring him from behind, we slightly alter our direction. The reason we do this is because we don't want to get stuck behind Ronaldo's body. We want to initiate contact side on or slightly ahead. So as we play it out, you can see how the change in direction and reassessing the situation really helped us, because once we do catch up the necessary ground, we're able to barge into him at a better angle and dispossess him from the ball. From these two examples, we can safely deduce that barging into a dribbler from behind is obviously the worst option, as you risk getting stuck like in the previous scenario with Maldini, but you also have to be careful not to take things for granted when you do have positional advantage. Things can go wrong really quickly, and we risk that in this example where we're comfortably ahead of Ronaldo with our Ogbonna, so we decide to initiate physical contact. The problem with this running duel is that Ronaldo is also taking a touch at the same time we decide to enter, and in FIFA 20, in these situations, you risk completely going through him. That's why you have to be mindful of these types of situations and be prepared to hold down L2 almost as a way to pull on the brakes, redirect your left stick, and make sure you always keep your body between the ball and the attacker if you happen to slip ahead of the dribbler. Now that you know the ideal angles, the final piece of the puzzle in these physical battles is what inputs you should be going for. You can get away with not pressing anything and just focusing on running into opponents at first as you develop your timing, but over time you can actually use the shielding button to cause even more problems to the dribbler. That will add more depth to this process and can help you in tougher situations. Here, for example, I'm forced to chase down Ronaldo with Payet, who is not really exactly the best defensive midfielder in the game. As we get close to him at an angle that we do like, we press the shield button, aka L2 on PlayStation or LT on Xbox, activating a shoulder bar edge animation that leaves Ronaldo shocked for long enough to give us the time to safely retrieve the ball. If that is still not enough, an extra step you can take after the initial usage of the L2 button is to repeatedly press it during your physical battle, as we do here when we enter the physical contact with our center back in Rio Ferdinand, and to finish the job we spam the L2 button repeatedly in an attempt to physically overpower our opponent. The question now is, what do you do when you're forced in a running duel where you lost your timing, you have no means to catch up, there might be not enough space, and there's no way for you to find an entry point at a favorable angle? There's nothing that will give you the 100% guarantee when your opponent has the physical lead over you, but you can always make life as difficult as possible for your opponent. Here, with Ronaldo right on the edge of my box and not much room for me to play with in terms of finding a different angle, I'm just ever so slightly behind my opponent. Rather than going for the shield button or the shield button spam, I decide to risk it by spam pressing the tackle button, which would be circle on PS4 or B on Xbox, in order to bother and shrug my opponent as much as possible. As you can see, we do get away with it this time and manage to shove him off the ball, and it's definitely something that you should keep in mind as last resort situations might arise. On the other side of the spectrum, you're also going to run into situations where you want to win a running duel while you are the offensive player. And once again, there are some things to keep in mind to make sure you don't end up squandering opportunities where you are sprinting with the ball and the defensive player ends up having the better review in said duel. First thing to go over is situations where you're better off cutting the duel short and disengaging from it before it extends too long, where your chances of coming out of it with the ball are too low. Here, for example, I'm on the wing with Pirlo and my opponent is approaching my player with his center back in David Luiz. Now, despite me being closer to the ball than he is, I'm aware of not only the difference in pace, but also his defender's superiority in a physical sense. Yes, Pirlo is a good dribbler, so I could wait for him to latch onto me and dribble away, but it's easier said than done once he's actually locked onto me. So as a result, I disengage before it even begins by performing a ball roll and turning the opposite way. Now, the ball roll is a really basic skill move with tons of use. For more on that, be sure to check out our basic skill move video that goes over that, and more. Link to that will be available in the description box down below. That being said, as you can see when we play this out in this situation, because of who I had selected, I got out before it could have gotten ugly and had space to turn around and work the ball back up the field. The shield feature can be used similarly to the ball roll, where once your player gets to a running duel first, you use the shield button, that is L2 on PlayStation or LT on Xbox, to protect the ball. All of which, as you wait for your opponent's defenders to pass you by so that you can safely decide what to do and where to go next once the uncertainty ends. Finally, the same way the L2 button could be used in a running duel defensively to shrug off your opponent, the same can be done offensively. Here, our opponent makes the mistake of being way too overconfident with his Rio Ferdinand and his physical ability, and he decides to attack our Neymar from a very poor angle. In these situations, by pressing and timing the L2 button with the contact, and then, if needed, spamming the L2 button if the initial L2 doesn't work, you'll be able to punish your opponent's hasty decision making by triggering an animation that can help you shrug off stronger defenders, despite, like in this example, using a clearly physically inferior player. Running duels will occur more or less depending on how any game progresses. Sometimes, of course, with people dropping back too much, you won't see much of them, but when they do happen, it's important to know exactly what to do because everything can happen so quickly. In this video, we showed you the preferable angles to initiate a tackle or a shoulder barge defensively, but it's important not to take positioning for granted if you start in a favorable position, as sometimes, like we showed you guys, you might slip away and risk losing control of what was seemingly under control. The same information can be used offensively in two ways. The first is to use it in a way that allows you to know when to disengage, because you're either using someone unable to hold his own physically, or you can sense a low percentage of success because of how your opponent is successfully positioning himself. Now, the second is to capitalize on your opponent's mistakes. If he comes at you from a poor angle, shrug him off and make him pay for it. Nonetheless, that's going to be it from me today. I hope this was useful, and if it was, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. We also want to thank our elite supporters over on Patreon, and if you're interested, you can become a patron today to support the channel as well as receive cool benefits in return over at patreon.com/BPG The Guide.